Obviously, I can't tell time. For me, I was late. Anyway, good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever, whoever is here. Hello, Alan, Robert, Rondell, Robert again, the 1-1, and of course, Mr. StreamYard. Hello there. And to anybody else out there watching, I just going to do a quick update about Alpine and GTII. I know I spoke about GTII last Friday or something, and I said if I had any additional information or confirmed information, I would pass it on. So I will do that. And then since then, Alpine, who I compared to Ghislaine Maxwell in terms of them tolerating certain behavior. There was a update about them too, so I wanted to update you about that. We'll do it quickly and go from there, and I'm sure it will be hugely entertaining. Hello, Kathy. Toast Stones. Is that correct? How do you pronounce that? Toast owns or two stones. Okay. And boy, these names are tough. Crotu? Sorry. Jason. Boy, I'm butchering these names. Anyway, greetings. So I'm going to do that briefly and bring you up to speed, and then we can go from there. Before I start, I'm also going to do I have another one, another live stream scheduled later today at, I think, 4 Eastern, where I have an attorney on who represented a bunch of has nothing to do with this stuff, but an attorney who represented several of the Epstein victims, including the very first one. And it could be an interesting factual story. So we'll see how that goes. But before I start today, I just had a couple things to point out. What's orange and sounds like a parrot? A carrot. My friend told me as he got older, he realized all the people that he had lost along the way, and that maybe that a career as a tour guide was a bad choice. Speaking of that, I used to be really indecisive, but now I'm not sure. And last but not least, I recently took a poll, and 100% of the people in the tent were angry when it collapsed. Okay. No jokes this afternoon, by the way. So this is all the jokes you're going to get unless I do a third live stream for some odd reason today. So let's talk about two things, Alpine and GTII. So first, Alpine. Alpine, I think yesterday, day before, the 28th, whenever that was. That would be yesterday, I guess. So Alpine got expelled, by FINRA, et cetera, and all that stuff's going on. They also got basically terminated by the DTCC. They did because the DTCC is responsible for all the settlement, et cetera. Looks at its members and rates them and their risk. And based upon the risk, they may force them to put up certain money, or they may be required to post bonds or deposits, et cetera. And there was a rule that was put out by the DTCC. And by the way, I don't know how many C's there are in the DTCCC, so the number that you use is acceptable, even if it's 5 C's. Anyway, since that's the overall watcher and settlement party, you need them if you're going to be doing settlement, especially with the work that Alpine does. So Alpine got into trouble with DTCC, and eventually DTCC terminated them. So if they terminated them, they couldn't do settlement. It would make their business more difficult to operate, might destroy their business being Alpine. Alpine, challenged it, went through the DTCC, they lost. The appeal from the DTC was the SEC. That was decided yesterday. And what they decided was that Alpine didn't challenge the rule when it was implemented. So whenever the rule came into effect, Alpine could have filed a legal challenge to the rule. They just bitched about it, but they didn't file a legal challenge. And the SEC says that was the only way they could contest this ruling by the DTCC. They would have had to challenge the rule. All they did was just challenge the ruling of the DTCC, not the rule. And because of that, that was the wrong way to proceed, and you lose. And so the SEC denied the appeal of the DTCC. If the DTCC can keep Alpine from being able to settle trades in the microcaps and wherever they work, wherever that is, then it'll be tough for Alpine to have a continuing business. That's the idea. After the ruling of the SEC, however, Alpine will have the opportunity to file or seek relief in federal court. And because that's all they do, they don't seem to have much of a business, but they do seem to employ a lot of lawyers and spend a lot of money in legal fees. I would expect them to challenge the ruling of these SEC in federal court, and they'll probably make all the constitutional arguments. Now, theoretically, unless they got a stay of the ruling by the SEC, that might still terminate their business. A stay means that it's stopped, that the ruling of the SEC would be stopped until there was further review by some court. So I expect Alpine to ask the SEC to stay their ruling until Alpine gets a chance to appeal before or pursue action before a federal court. If the SEC doesn't say yes, then Alpine will ask the federal court to stay the decision. And you know, it's not guaranteed, but I would more likely than not, I would say that the decision of yesterday will be stayed until there's a final ruling by a federal court. And that's the way I would expect. So it's a good step towards the elimination of Alpine, but not complete. And certainly, again, no reason why any of the regulators doesn't go into federal court. Why not beat Alpine to the punch? Since Alpine, I don't understand this. Since the feds have to spend money on defending these cases anyway, why not beat, and I've suggested this many times, beat Alpine to the punch. Go to federal court, get a receiver appointed, take over the business, done, end. I don't have to keep on doing these stupid videos about Alpine, and we're all done. Makes logical sense, as opposed to what you're going to do is Alpine will file an action in the federal court challenging all your basis and power, and you're going to be defending yourself, as opposed to separate and apart from whether you have the constitutional right or not, file an action on behalf of the government and the consumers to get them out of business, put a receiver in place. So that's what I suggest they do, but we have kind of in the procedural steps, we've made one step forward, and next step will be federal court on the DTCC matter. That's separate and apart from the expulsion proceedings involving FINRA, which are ongoing and will be litigated also, but that's separate. So hopefully both will end in the expulsion and Alpine will be done, but let's get it done now as opposed to later. All right. So that's the update about Alpine. They couldn't, basically, because they were too risky, they got into trouble with the DTCC. They lost at the DTCC level. Then they lost their appeal before the SEC because they didn't challenge the rule correctly. And now the likelihood is they're going to try to make their arguments before the federal courts. That's the current of Alpine and the DTCC. GTII. So last time about GTII, I was talking about it, I think Thursday, Friday, whatever. And I said if I had, further information, I would pass it on. So I have had further communication and kind of wanted to go over like 3 kind of topics, maybe 4 topics about GTII and an update as to that. So this is my understanding. It's not etched in stone. It's not guaranteed, all that stuff. It's certainly not legal advice. And I don't want to hear you citing it to anybody else. So as of now, and this kind of following up, we'll talk about the audit. As of now, the auditors, it's believed, have everything they need to complete the task. It would be guessing as to when that completion would occur, but the expectation is it's in the near term, but we don't have like an exact time frame. So that's one. So the audit seems like, and I was kind of suggesting that, had an opportunity to kind of confirm that the auditors have everything they need as far as everybody knows. They're completing their task, and it should be anytime soon. You can imagine with the management who operated GTII before that it might be a pretty complex task in terms of doing an audit, because they may have been very creative in their tactics. But anyway, we've confirmed that the auditor apparently has everything they need, and they're moving forward, and we're expecting some conclusion. About the audit, though, and I just want to make this clear, and I've said it before, but I want to make it clear. There's no guarantees that even though we're moving in a positive direction, we're all optimistic, etc. There's no guarantees that GTII will ever trade. So it's not automatic that there will be an audit and then it'll trade. We're hopeful that's what'll happen. And as long as the SEC doesn't intervene to smash everything up, we're hopeful that will happen. And that was a concern. So I just want to make sure it's clear. It's not like cause and effect. Audit's done, it's trade. The audit has to be done as one of the conditions to make it trade. And it's probably, the most important condition, but it's something that has to be done. And again, no guarantees that even if it's done, that it will trade, although everybody's optimistic about it. And we certainly don't want, even though we all feel the same way about management, we certainly don't want the SEC to intervene to take over for the receiver, because that would be, that's been the statement all along. That would be a disaster, I think, for all shareholders if the SEC, in its competency, stepped in and took over. So my guess, my strong guess, my very strong guess, is the SEC at some level is aware of GTII and is looking at it, but is staying kind of away. But at some point in time, they certainly could intervene. And my guess is if they intervened, it would not be good, beyond the fact it wouldn't be good for shareholders. I think for management, it would end up with a lot of stripes, if you know what I'm saying. I think that's where they would end up. So I don't understand. That's why it's confusing to me why management wouldn't immediately want to get this resolved, because if they don't, I don't see how it, and it's not just management. I think it's like family of management, whoever were beneficiaries. I just don't understand how they don't perceive that, notwithstanding whatever happens here, if they make too much of an ado and too public an ado, it may end up with a really negative outcome, much worse than losing all their money. But we have to understand that the SEC is not, we presume the SEC is aware of this, and we don't want them, as much as we want like the management to go down the river, we don't want to not get paid, right? So it's kind of a trade-off and a balancing act. Last, I talked about the shares, the recovery of shares the last time, I think Thursday or Friday. So I would say now, I think we're near the end of the line in terms of negotiations with the management. So, and I don't know specifics, I don't know details, but let's say, but we've talked about this, that there have been negotiations, and I think the receivers put in the reports, they're going to try to get back all the shares. So I'm going to make up a scenario, but let's say, there's been discussions between the receiver and David Reichman. And they've been talking about, you return X number of shares, whatever I have no idea what any discussions were in terms of facts. But I believe that there was a kind of clock running. And if there's not a resolution within a certain time frame, then I think, and I feel pretty comfortable about this, that I think that it will be, an onslaught against Reichman in terms of litigation. And if there's an onslaught in litigation against Reichman, it raises the risk also that the SEC might rear their ugly head for shareholders, but I think mostly for management. I don't understand. I really don't understand the strategy where they'd want the SEC to get involved in light of the conduct that's referenced in the receiver's reports. But the way I get it is we're near the end. So if there's not a negotiation of those points within, certainly within time frame, certainly within the next 30 days, but I would think it's less. I think it's very possible that the approach going against Reichman and whoever else it was involved will change and will be much more oppressive towards those people. From a pragmatic standpoint, notwithstanding the scumbags that I believe they are and that you all believe, I'd still prefer a negotiated resolution done as quickly as possible to keep the SEC out, to raise the likelihood of the stock trading, notwithstanding my disdain, my hatred, my disgust for management, who should be on that show. I watched this show on, I forget which channel it's on. It's called American Greed. These guys are like the poster children for that. So just kind of recapping. Audit, as far as I know, up to date. Auditors have all they need and they're moving forward. No guarantees that audit will make it tradable, but still remain optimistic. And, I think the target company, they're involved, they're optimistic. Target company being, I think, through John Forster. And the action to recover shares were near either a deal or a war. And I'd prefer the deal, but a war, I would say, we all want the money, right? Even though in my mind, when I entered this, I just presumed it's zero. So it makes it easier to kind of operate that way. And I do. So it doesn't, so as far as I'm concerned, I lost all my money and I'm just moving forward. But I can't imagine the logic, and maybe these people need some psychological help. I don't know what their underlying psychological issues are, but if they don't resolve this, the outcome is going to be, just black, dark. I mean, and I don't have any firsthand knowledge. Nobody from the FBI has called me to tell me that. Nobody from the SEC has directly told me that. But I can only believe that if management doesn't work this out, that they're going to end up, that new prison that the president wants to bring back, Alcatraz. How do you think Reichman would do at Alcatraz? Could you think he could swim? Because, part of the Alcatraz, the way it used to work, I don't know if any of you have been there or when it was open, is they would fatten up the prisoners and the water is really cool because the Pacific Ocean is cool. And the waves were very brisk. And if they fatten you up and you still tried to swim off the island because it was cold and because of the waves and because you were fat after they fatten you up, and they also give you a lot of hot showers too. So that was kind of interesting the way they would treat the inmates and the difference in temperature between the water of the shower and the temperature of the ocean. It was shocking. So maybe somebody like Reichman should maybe he should be the inaugural resident of the new Alcatraz. That's my suggestion. So again, if I were in their shoes, I don't understand why they're not operating with this being frightened that they're going to end up in prison. And for David Reichman, who apparently was suggested was always concerned about his daughter, I would think exposing himself, not literally, to the SEC would expose his daughter. And maybe, Reichman's an old man. Maybe he's going to die and not go to prison. But there may be others that do. And so that's serious stuff. I don't understand why they don't get it. They must be just so disturbed, emotionally, psychologically damaged, so corrupt, unethical, that even things in their own best interest they don't get. But anyway, that's kind of the update. That's since the last time, and I have more confirmation of the information I gave to you last time, as kind of I referenced here. Last thing, there was a lawsuit filed against, I think some people, because it came up on X, there was a GTI filed an action against Astra. Astra had, I think, owed GTII some money, a couple $100,000. I think, the Receivers Council tried to negotiate it. They, obviously got a bunch of guff back, Guff, and they decided to sue Astra. I think it was filed this week or recently. It's not a big amount of money, but it's, at some point in time it's justified. And maybe also it's a way of making a point to others who haven't capitulated yet, that if you don't capitulate, the Receivers Council will sue you. You'll have to pay a bunch of money and legal fees and go for it. So that's why that might be in there. So just summarizing briefly, Alpine, the SEC affirmed the DTC's expulsion of Alpine because Alpine's counsel didn't bring an action on the right basis. It's now going to federal court, and we'll have to see if there's a stay. GTII auditor seems to have everything they need, no guarantees. SEC seems to be monitoring but not intervening, and the efforts at returning shares, especially from the principals, is ongoing, but probably near an end in terms of whether it's going to be negotiated or whether Reichman is going to be absolutely annihilated in court, end up in jail, etc. One or the other. That's it. And I've spoken to, obviously, to I've regular communication with Mr. Forster, and he's still remaining optimistic, positive. I think I spoke to him today, actually. So that's kind of an update. When I have more information especially about the share, about the issues, about the litigation involving the shares, I will let you know. If there is a big change, material change, I'm expecting an filing, an 8K to be filed, or an 8H or an HG2 be filed. See if you guys know what those are, because I don't. To put in there. Otherwise, when I have some new information, I'll let you know. Obviously, I'll keep you apprised. And if you have questions, comments, put them in the stream later on. To all of you out there who spent your time, I appreciate it. Please comment, like, share. Again, ask questions. Happy to. You will see if you put a comment in there, I do look at every comment. I may not like them all, but I do look at every one, and you'll know that I looked at it because I'll make a little mark. And if I can add something to your comment, I'll add something. But if you want to state your opinion, you have a question, whatever, feel free to put it in the comments once this is posted. So to all you out there, have a wonderful day. Again, I'm doing another one kind of on a different topic today at 4 Eastern. No jokes, but 4 Eastern. So if any of you want to pop in, feel free. Otherwise, have a great day. And again, I'll update you when I have some more to talk about. And be well, everybody. And that's all I got to say.